Hey everybody, so I am here to discuss Netflix's adaptation of the infamous August Wilson's play, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Now, this film just was released. Actually, not just on Netflix, but also in some movie theaters as well. However, it was released on December 18th, and the cast of this film includes the late but still great Chadwick Boseman, Viola Davis, Taylor Page, Coleman Domingo, Glenn Turman, Jeremy Shamos, Michael Potts, Dustin Brown, Jonathan Coyne, and many, many others. The late playwright August Wilson did in fact inform the public that the play Ma Rainey's Black Bottom was based off of fictional events as well as fictional characters that he drew inspiration from the real Ma Rainey. Now, for those of you who may not know, Ma Rainey was a woman that was considered to be the first woman of blues. According to Britannica.com, Ma Rainey, also known as Gertrude Pridgett, was born in April 26th of 1886, even though there are some speculations that she was actually born as early as September 1882, and she passed on December 22nd of 1939. She was an American singer who was known as the Mother of Blues and who was recognized as the first great professional blues vocalist. So while Ma Rainey herself is actually a real person, the playwright August Wilson drew inspiration from her life in order to create the fictional play and events in his play, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Even though the events and characters of the play were fictional, the script itself was still filled with truthful dialogue that was not only relevant during the time that the play was written and performed, but also even today. August Wilson wrote Ma Rainey's Black Bottom in 1982. The actual play was released in 1984. In 2016, the Tony Award winning actress Felicia Rashad, who many of us know from The Cosby Show, directed Ma Rainey's Black Bottom in Los Angeles. This cast included the actor Keith David, who many of us are familiar with from Greenleaf, as well as Glenn Turman, who during this play actually played the same character that he is currently playing in today's Ma Rainey's Black Bottom film. Also included in this cast is Jason Durden, Damon Gupton, who many of us are familiar with from Black Lightning, as well as Lilith White, who plays Ma Rainey herself. As for the film Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, it was directed by George C. Wolfe, written by Ruben Santiago Hudson, who did an excellent job with staying true to most of the dialogue from August Wilson's original play. It was also produced by the award winning actor Denzel Washington. So, if you have not seen the film, this is the part where I want to alert you that I am getting ready to discuss it. So, this is technically a spoiler alert. However, I'm certain that some may have already seen the play, or if not, have at some point read August Wilson's Ma Rainey's Black Bottom script and is probably aware of how the film goes. But if not, again, I just want to alert you that I am getting ready to discuss the film. So, in some way, this is a spoil alert. While I don't want to make this discussion too long, I have to highlight the fact that each and every one of the actors did an excellent job with bringing their character to life. The late Chadwick Boseman is no exception. This is known as his final performance, and some may even say after watching this film that he truly gave his all in this final performance. Chadwick Boseman plays the role of a very ambitious yet hot-tempered character by the name of Levy, who plays the trumpet in the band. His worldviews tend to clash with the other band members who are more older and experienced than his character. He tends to have an outlook on the world that is negative, yet he remains ambitious at the same time. Now, that negativity can be attributed to the things that he has experienced in life, which were very traumatic, highly due to racism, and it has left him somewhat of a shell of a man, but also he still sees himself being able to rise above all of that and gain some sort of notoriety and financial success in life. The most powerful scene that I feel the character had is when he delivered his monologues and he was actually clashing with the other men. For example, one of the strongest acting points that I saw, I mean the whole entire performance by Chadwick Boseman was just awesome. But the one that really caught me the most is when he delivered this monologue about his mom and his dad and how these white males entered the home of his mother. And while the script does not actually say the R word, the script pretty much alluded, or the dialogue alluded to the fact that the character Levy's mother was sexually molested by these males, these savages that entered her home. And they were Caucasian males that entered her home and took advantage of her. And eventually we learned this, that it was about nine males, because I can't remember if the film says it, but I know August Wilson's script does let us know it was nine males, because Levy's monologue continues to let us know that his father actually sought revenge on these males in a very slick way, in which he became acquainted with one of them and sold his property to that person. And I believe it was strategic, because eventually he returned to that property to kill four of the nine males, the nine savages, before ultimately he was killed himself by the remaining savages. I also want to highlight Viola Davis in this film as well. Her acting, as usual, was just absolutely outstanding. Not to mention, we have to not forget the fact that she actually gained weight for this performance. Now, I don't know about you all, but myself personally, I always have to give it up for the actors and actresses that have to literally physically change their appearance by doing things such as losing weight or gaining weight for these roles. I am so sure that it cannot be that easy to do. So I have to highlight that. And she actually mentioned recently on her Instagram, on her social media, that she has been working out to lose that weight that she had to gain for this role. So, in the film as well as in the play, Ma Rainey is our central character. She is the reason for this meeting at this studio. And mind you, the entire thing seems to take place in one day, one studio session, but it is a very long, drawn out studio session for reasons you'll have to watch the film to see. However, Ma Rainey seems to take on a very masculine role in this entire situation. And to be honest, it definitely highlights something when it comes to highly melanated women in America. Not all of us, but some, where it seems as though Ma Rainey is taking on the responsibility of not only making sure that she commands and demands respect in the society that often disrespects and overlooks highly melanated American women, but also she's not only standing up for herself in the process, she's standing up for the value and worth of those around her. What I took away from Ma Rainey's characteristics when it comes to her performance and how she dealt with the manager that she had, as well as the individual who was producing the music, and it would seem to be his studio session. What I took away from her encounter with them is that while some may translate her actions as diva-like antics, what I recognize is later that Ma Rainey revealed that these Caucasian males that they were doing business with, once they got her voice and her talent on wax, or once they recorded their music, they would just throw her away. They only had use for her when it came to wanting something from her and needing something from her in order to capitalize off her talent. So she was going to demand and command whatever it is that she felt like she deserved in that moment in order to make a point that regardless of how talented she was, once they received her talent and did whatever they were going to do with it to capitalize off it even more, they were just going to eventually throw her away. They would no longer have any use for her. So until that was completed, she was going to demand all that she felt she deserved to demand. How is this relevant to today, you may ask? Well, these type of situations, I truly believe, still occur today. We hear a lot about the wealth gap when it comes to the so-called African American community. And we also know that many of us still have to go, or feel like we have to go through Caucasians in order to get opportunities and access to certain resources. So many of us tend to bend or fold for individuals like this in order to obtain and gain access to the resources that they have that we may not feel like we can find within ourselves or within our own community. However, with the character Mon Rainey, what she recognized is that even though these Caucasian managers and the producer of the studio, while they owned the ability to record her voice and create a record where her record could make money, she also recognized that they actually needed her more than she needed them, because without her talent, they would be unable to capitalize off of the popularity that she had already established as a blues singer. So, with that understanding, she walked around in her worth and did not allow them to treat her any different or any less than what she felt she deserved to be treated. However, Ma Rainey's attitude was a very big contrast in comparison to the male characters of the play or this film. The male characters tend to have been more submissive when it came to interacting with the Caucasian manager and the Caucasian owner of the studio. The male characters of the band tend to have been more of yes sir and no sir when it came to addressing the manager of the studio. My theory is that because Ma Rainey was more so of the face of the group and the actual vocal talent, she held a stronger position than they believed they held when it came to demanding respect from the Caucasian businessmen. I also believe that because they were more submissive when it came to their interactions, it made Ma Rainey also have to step up and be more masculine to demand the respect for not only herself, but the entire band and also her nephew in the process. And this is not to be funny, but again, this is very symbolic to the highly melanated women, um, particularly some highly melanated women today, and how many of us feel the need to operate more in our masculine, especially in the professional world where we find ourselves typically unprotected and more likely to speak up in defense for ourselves and demand the respect and value of what we know we are worth. While it was understood by most of the male band members that Ma Rainey had the upper hand when it came to the interactions with these Caucasian business males, I don't believe that these other band members rested in that. I don't believe that they were necessarily okay with it and they took pride in seeing a highly melanated female counterpart really have to step into her masculine role in order to demand respect for everyone, including herself. whereas that would normally be the male role in society to protect the woman and demand that respect for her as well and protect her honor. However, I believe it is because of the shared experiences and what they saw as far as other highly melanated beings, particularly highly melanated American males and American men, go through when it came time to speak out and stand up for themselves, and how they were castrated, how they were hung, how they were persecuted for doing so. I believe ultimately that was the driving factor that silenced the men with fear, but meanwhile empowered the highly melanated female to fight for herself and for others. Another character in the film that really stood out to me was the character played by the actor Glenn Turman, and that was the character of Toledo. Now, Toledo appeared to be the oldest in the group. He was very wise, very knowledgeable, but he was also someone where if you don't follow his words closely, you could get lost in translation. One of the scenes that really stood out to me the most, or rather the monologue that was delivered by the character Toledo, was the monologue in regards to, I suppose, comparing the current highly melanated American beings who are also called African Americans, comparing us to a big stew. So what the character Toledo mentioned in his monologue was that the stolen African, as it is believed by some, here in America, are like a stew. We have carrots, we have peas, we have all these different ingredients of stew that basically are drawn from, I suppose, many different tribes in Africa, right? That is the theory, and or one of the many theories. And with this stew, we have the Caucasian male who's making the stew technically, and because they've allegedly taken us from that land and brought us to America, stolen us from that land and brought us to America. And so they eat the stew, meaning they use us up till they don't need us anymore. And now what we have left in this day and age, or rather during the time that this film takes place, which is 1927 in Chicago, Illinois, we have left over the highly melanated Americans, aka the African Americans, that are like the leftovers of the stew. But meanwhile, the Caucasian male is full now. And so the question remains, what becomes of the leftovers, which is all of us? If we're no longer needed, what becomes of us? So that was a very eye opening, very interesting comparison made by the character Toledo, and that monologue was very powerful, and it may have went over some of the characters' heads, but I believe the audience watching, for some of us, we know all too well what the character Toledo was implying when making the reference or the comparison of Stu and the so-called African American. Levy was one of the characters that acted as if he didn't understand what Toledo was saying when Toledo would go into these very deep intellectual conversations. However, looking back on the film and thinking critically about it, I really believe that Levy understood perfectly well what Toledo would mean when he would make these comparisons and these deep intellectual analysis. And I believe that the reason why Levy pretended like he did not understand is because that a lot of which Toledo stood for was very much in contradiction to what Levy stood for. For example, Toledo believed that it was every highly melanated American responsibility to push things forward for each other. However, with the character Levy, it seemed as though Levy was very selfish and did not care for those particular kind of things. He was also very materialistic, and his materialism was very symbolic to some of the things that we still experience today as a so-called people. For example, in the film, it is revealed that Levy spent a generous amount on shoes. Now, this amount, I believe, came out to be $11 or so, and you would think in today's world that is nowhere near an exorbitant amount, but I suppose back in 1927 it truly was. So the big deal was that here this man was spending all this money on shoes to look good and impress others. And it was very symbolic to highly melanated beings today, where me personally, growing up in high school, if you did not wear name brand clothing and name brand tennis shoes, you were more than likely picked on for having on buddies or off brand clothes and things. Like, it was mostly highly melanated beings that attended my school and lived in the area that I lived in. So if I did not have on those things, which because my family was unable to afford those kind of things, chances are I did not have those things on. I was more than likely picked on for not having those things. But as an adult, what I realized is those material things that we wear mean absolutely nothing. As it's interesting that other cultures who have true wealth do not wear their wealth. So with that being said, this goes back to the movie where we have Levy, someone who aspires to be wealthy and aspires for notoriety, hasn't quite arrived there yet, but tends to wear his money on his body. He tends to believe that if he can dress expensive, then it will gain him the respect in society that he desires. So I want to just draw on one more thing before I close out this video, and that is the fact that eventually I believe what happens in towards the end of the film is very symbolic to what occurs in the highly melanated American neighborhoods, such as specifically more of the lower income neighborhoods. And that is the violence that occurs towards the end, or the vicious act that occurs towards the end between Toledo and Levy. So it seems as though when Levy was informed by Studevant, the Caucasian it was the Caucasian record studio owner, when Levy was told by the Caucasian record studio owner Studevant that he would not be using Levy's band in order to record the songs that Levy gave him and that he wrote himself, Levy was very infuriated. And during the entire, well, not even during the entire film, but there was a point in the film that Levy said that he knew how to handle the white male, and that he knew, like his father, he was capable of smiling in their face. But when it comes down to it, if he had to take one of them out, I suppose he was alluding to the fact that he would do so in the way that his father did. So at that moment in that scene where Levy is told by Studevant that Studevant is reneging on his promise and that he would not be using Levy's band to record any of the songs, and that in fact he wouldn't be using the songs at all, I personally thought that Levy was going to kill Studevant in that scene. However, here is where the symbolism comes in and the relevancy for today and what is happening today in some of the highly melanated communities, particularly the lower income communities, is this scene towards the end where when Levy, instead of taking his rage out on Studevant, who pretty much appears to have shot down his hopes and dreams because he had been ranting and raving for his entire appearance, just about his entire appearance in the film, how he was going to be big time because of this opportunity that was going to be presented to him by, or provided to him by Studevant. You would think that he would have killed Studevant for shooting down that dream. However, he goes back into the room with the band, and Toledo, the older gentleman, accidentally steps on his shoes. And it wasn't a big deal that he stepped on his shoes. It was the symbolism of it all. And this is what I drew from it. I drew from the fact that Levy was already infuriated by the fact that the opportunity that he believed one man, Studevant, a Caucasian male, held in his hands over his life as a highly melanated male, a highly melanated man. I believe when that man disrespected him by reneging on his promise to record his music with his band, that was already the point where Levy had pretty much was like over it. He pretty much was at his last straw with things, and definitely with his sanity and his temperament. However, I don't believe that he was bold enough to take it out on Studevant. And I'm pretty sure in that moment moment he juggled with the repercussions of such an action had he killed a Caucasian male. So instead, when he went back into that band room and Toledo just happened to accidentally step on his brand new shoes, it gave Levy a, I want to say it gave him an outlet. It gave him a so called artificial or superficial reason to let his aggression go. And this is when he kills Toledo. He keeps going on and on about his shoe and how he stepped on it, and Toledo is apologizing, but that apology was not good enough. Not good enough, not because Toledo did anything wrong, but because there was already an anger, there was already aggression living inside of Levy, who felt castrated in some way or some fashion or some form, if you want to call it symbolic, but he felt castrated. He felt like his dreams was basically knocked down and he was disrespected by Studevant reneging on the promise that he had made in regards to recording Levy's music with Levy's band. So when he went back into that room, Toledo gave him an excuse by stepping on his shoes unknowingly. He gave him an excuse to release that anger, and he killed Toledo. So this is very symbolic. And if you've watched the movie or you've seen the play, you more than likely understand what I mean in this and how it relates to even today and up until this point today, how we have so much crime in the highly melanated American communities, particularly the lower income communities. And it's almost as though, you can call it black on black crime, you can call it intercultural crime, you can call it whatever you want, but it's almost as though there's a lot of aggression and rage being that is out here, a lot of aggression and rage, particularly in highly melanated American males, and they take it out on one another. And it's interesting because I always draw this point that when the police arrives on the scene, everyone gets scared. No one shoots at the police. No one fights back at the police, but we don't mind killing each other. So this was definitely an example of that. Disagree with me if you want to, or agree with me if you want to, but this is just my personal observation. I really don't need any validation for it. This is seriously my personal observation. And I saw that with this film. And this is exactly why I say August Wilson and this his script, the dialogue for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, there are so many parts in that play that is still relevant today. Mind you, the play was written in 1982. It was supposed to be based on events in 1927, and here we are in 2020 where the play has now been made into a film, and the dialogue is still relevant even to this day. And to top it all off, for the final scene of the film, now this isn't written in the play, but I thought this was interesting that this was included in the film, that this was added to the film, is there is a scene where Studevant, the owner of the recording studio, takes the song, mind you. Now at this point, this is probably in the future, and more than likely Levy at this point is more than likely locked up for the killing of Toledo. He takes Levy's song, the same song, which was one of the songs of many that Levy had written, and he told Levy that those songs were not going to sell and that he did not want Levy to play them with his band. He felt like they wouldn't sell, but he would at least buy the songs for $5, right? He took that very same song and apparently gave it to a Caucasian big band and had them record the song in the studio. So I believe that scene right there was definitely representation of the cultural appropriation that not only took place back in the 1900s, but that are still occurring even to this day. So this film, y'all, this play, you got to give credit where credit is due. This is August Wilson's brainchild. This is August Wilson's play. They really stayed true to the play's dialogue. It was very, I'm gonna say, I'm going on a limb and say it was very little that was switched up for the movie, but there were some things that were added in the movie. But for the most part, they stayed hecka true to the dialogue from August Wilson's play. And that to me is paying serious homage, not to mention it worked out flawlessly, in my opinion. So I definitely want to give credit to the cast and crew. It was excellent to see. Me personally, unfortunately, I did not see the play before I saw the film. However, after watching the film, I personally immediately read the script because I really wanted to know what the script was like. Was the script like the film? And that's when I drew the connection that, oh my goodness, the script was dang near word for word with the film, with of course some additions to make it, ready for the big screen. But all in all, for a final performance for Chadwick Boseman, this was excellent. Viola Davis was excellent. All the actors and actresses that was a part of this film was very awesome. Also want to give a shout out to the young man who played Viola Davis' nephew, or Ma Rainey's nephew in the film. He did an excellent job, especially when it came to having to play a character that stutters. He did a very great job. All in all, it was great. It was a really great film, but it also was very, I want to say it's very daunting to what is still happening even today. While we know progression is constantly being made, it is just amazing that things that were happening at a certain period of time, it seems as though it's still happening even today. So that's it. You all let me know what you think about this film, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Peace.